everyone. My name's Sydney Christmas.
Is it?
Sydnie Christmas.
In a world saturated with reality show hopefuls and fleeting fame, one name has carved itself into the national memory with a mix of dazzling talent, controversial buzz, and undeniable heart. Sydnie Christmas. But behind the glittering stage lights and roaring applause lies a story far more complex than a viral audition clip. Who is she really? A humble gym employee moonlighting as a musical theater underdog, a seasoned stage performer whose spotlight came late, or perhaps both? A contradiction that made her the most polarizing figure of Britain's Got Talent season 7. When Sydnie stepped onto the stage for her audition, no one expected the storm she was about to unleash. She didn't walk out with celebrity status or a tragic backstory. She walked out with a joke, a grin, and a bold song choice, one that even made Simon Cowell groan. But within minutes, her powerful voice silenced every doubt in the room. Viewers didn't just witness a good audition, they witnessed a transformation. Sydnie went from unknown contestant to front-page phenomenon in the span of a single performance. But as the dust began to settle, something strange happened. Whispers began circulating online. Fans asked questions that producers didn't answer. Was she truly an underdog, or had the show handed a golden ticket to someone already deep in the industry? Her name became a battleground between admiration and accusation. Yet through it all, Sydnie remained unshaken. The woman the tabloids called a fix refused to fade quietly. Instead, she showed up again and again with a voice that demanded attention and a story no one could quite fit into a headline. This wasn't just a contestant, this was a reckoning. And Sydnie Christmas, love her or doubt her, wasn't leaving without a fight. It started with a laugh. When Sydnie Christmas introduced herself to the Britain's Got Talent judges, the audience chuckled at her holiday-themed name. She leaned into the humor, joking that her middle name was Mary, Sydnie Merry Christmas, before clarifying the playful lie with a cheeky grin. The moment felt light, even forgettable, until she announced the song she would perform, Tomorrow, from the musical Annie. Instantly, Simon Cowell groaned in visible disapproval, his well-known distaste for the song practically audible. But Sydnie, unfazed, smiled through it. She joked about having sung it at the age of 4, and that maybe, just maybe, she could do it better this time around. The banter set the stage for a performance no one was prepared for. As the orchestra began, a hush swept through the auditorium. Her voice, rich and emotionally textured, wrapped itself around every note like a velvet ribbon. What had started as a lighthearted moment quickly evolved into a masterclass in vocal control and storytelling. The camera cut to her grandmother in the crowd, eyes glassy with pride. By the time Sydnie hit the final crescendo, the audience had risen to its feet. All 4 judges followed. Amanda Holden was the first to speak, calling Sydnie's delivery not just moving, but soul-stirring. Bruno Tonioli, overcome with emotion, declared it a form of art. Even Simon, whose groan had set the tone at the start, offered an unexpected confession. She had made him love a song he had long despised. Then came the moment that would change her life. Amanda slammed the golden buzzer. Glitter poured from the rafters as Sydnie stood stunned in a rainfall of gold, her eyes wide, her family rushing to the stage in tears. The performance became an instant viral sensation. Millions watched and rewatched, mesmerized by the authenticity and polish she brought to a song that had been sung 1,000 times before, but never quite like that. Yet as social media flooded with praise and headlines celebrated her as the breakout star of the season, a more complicated conversation was beginning to take shape. Questions were surfacing, praise was turning into suspicion, and what many didn't know was that Sydnie's biggest battle wasn't on the stage that night, it was just beginning. No sooner had the golden buzzer confetti settled than the whispers began. It didn't take long for online sleuths to piece together a deeper look at Sydnie Christmas's past, and what they found sent shockwaves through the Britain's Got Talent fanbase. Far from being a plucky amateur pulled from obscurity, Sydnie had a rich resume in musical theater, with credits in high-profile productions like Starlight Express in Bochum, Germany, and Lazarus at London's King's Cross Theatre. She wasn't exactly an undiscovered talent. She had even appeared on E4's semi-scripted reality series Stage School, where viewers had already gotten a glimpse of her performing chops. For some fans, these revelations didn't just feel surprising, they felt like betrayal. Social media exploded with accusations. She's a plant, some claimed. Others cried foul, accusing BGT of misleading audiences by presenting Sydnie as a struggling unknown. To many, the show's original ethos, uncovering raw, unpolished talent from everyday walks of life, seemed compromised. Her golden buzzer moment, once celebrated as authentic and heartwarming, was now labeled by some as orchestrated and unfair. The controversy wasn't just about Sydnie, it reignited a long-running debate about the presence of seasoned professionals on talent competitions. How can viewers emotionally invest in a story of discovery when the contestant has already performed for thousands in Europe's most iconic venues? Producers remained largely silent, but the narrative outside the studio grew louder. questioning whether the judges had truly been surprised or if the outcome had been scripted for maximum emotional payoff. For Sydnie, the backlash was swift and brutal. She found herself caught in the crossfire between admiration and outrage, a living contradiction in the court of public opinion. Yet what many failed to consider was this: if her past was so impressive, why had she not yet made it? Why had someone with that level of talent and training been struggling to survive, not headlining Broadway? This wasn't the story of a ringer sent in to dominate amateurs. This was the story of a performer who, despite years of training, had met closed door after closed door. What critics dismissed as a fix, Sydnie had lived as rejection. Her casting history didn't shield her. It nearly broke her. And while the internet debated her place on the show, Sydnie quietly held her ground. Because what viewers didn't yet know was that the woman they were accusing of gaming the system had nearly given up entirely. Until Britain's Got Talent became her final act of hope. Long before she ever stood under the Britain's Got Talent spotlight, Sydnie Christmas stood at the edge of something far more sobering: giving up. Though her critics saw a performer with an enviable resume, what they didn't see was the private toll a decade of rejection had taken on her. Despite training, talent, and tenacity, the West End refused to open its doors. Auditions came and went, callbacks evaporated, and roles went to others again and again. While her peers found stable jobs, started families, and built lives outside of the spotlight, Sydnie stayed in London, chasing a dream that never seemed to love her back. In interviews following her audition, Sydnie opened up about the emotional toll of this cycle. She admitted there were moments when she questioned everything: her talent, her decisions, her future. Working a retail job at boutique Gym One Rebel just to make ends meet, she watched from the sidelines as others carved out traditional lives. It felt like I was standing still, she said, like nothing was ever going to happen for me. The industry, once full of promise, had turned into a source of silent heartbreak, and yet there was still a spark, small, stubborn, but alive. That flicker of hope was what carried her through one last audition, Britain's Got Talent. She hadn't expected much. In fact, she saw it as a kind of final attempt, a swan song before calling it quits for good. If it didn't work, she admitted, I was ready to walk away. But something inside her whispered that it was worth one more shot. Perhaps it was instinct, or maybe just desperation. But whatever it was, Sydnie showed up. She walked out on that stage, not as a contestant chasing fame, but as a woman with nothing left to lose. And that's what made her performance so electric. It wasn't polished ambition. It was raw, aching humanity. It was someone who had spent years hearing no, finally daring to ask for one last yes. Viewers saw it, judges felt it, and behind the headlines and the accusations, that moment, honest and unfiltered, struck a deeper chord than any resume could disprove. Sydnie wasn't trying to win a show. She was trying to reclaim her voice. And when the applause hit, something shifted. She hadn't just survived another audition. She had risen from the ashes of a career that almost wasn't. When Sydnie Christmas took the stage for her semifinal performance, expectations were already sky high. But what followed wasn't just another strong showing, it was a full-blown television event. The song? Frank Sinatra's My Way. A classic, a risk, a piece that, in lesser hands, can feel overdone. But as Sydnie stepped into the spotlight once again, something was different. There was a quiet fire behind her eyes, a controlled intensity that hinted she wasn't just singing, she was about to make a statement. From the first note, she commanded absolute silence. The confidence in her tone was sharper, the emotion more exposed. Every lyric landed like a personal declaration, each phrase resonating with the weight of someone who had tasted failure and decided to rise anyway. As the orchestra swelled behind her, the camera panned to the judges. Amanda Holden's eyes glistened. Her expression caught somewhere between awe and emotion. Alicia Dixon clutched her heart, visibly overwhelmed. Bruno Tonioli mouthed wow in silent disbelief. But it was Simon Cowell, often the most stoic in the panel, who leaned in completely captivated. When Sydnie hit the final high note, stretching it into a breathtaking crescendo, the room erupted. The audience was on its feet. All four judges followed, delivering a second full standing ovation that was even more fervent than the first. Viewers watching at home didn't just hear it, they felt it. Social media lit up with reactions, with hashtags like Sydnie Christmas and BGT Queen trending within minutes. Praise poured in from every corner of the internet. That gave me goosebumps, one viewer tweeted. She didn't just sing My Way, she lived it. Others declared her the clear winner of the competition, calling the performance iconic, flawless, and the best of the season. Amanda Holden, still visibly moved, told Sydnie that her power and presence had somehow surpassed her already unforgettable audition. Bruno called her voice a thunderstorm in silk, smooth yet devastating. Alicia described the performance as cinematic, saying it kept her heart racing from beginning to end. And Simon, he leaned forward with a simple but striking statement. This is why we do this show. What Sydnie had done that night wasn't just impress the judges, she had reclaimed the narrative. The doubts, the rumors, the whispered accusations about her background, all of it faded beneath the raw truth of that performance. My Way wasn't just a song choice, it was a challenge, a line in the sand, And with every verse, Sydnie reminded everyone watching that her journey hadn't been handed to her. She had earned it, her way. Just days after captivating millions on national television, Sydnie Christmas wasn't sipping champagne or walking red carpets. She was back behind the front desk of One Rebel, the boutique London gym where she worked part-time, folding towels, greeting members, and clocking in like any other employee. The contrast couldn't have been more striking. On screen, she was a powerhouse belting showstoppers to standing ovations. Off screen, she was the girl next door with a name no one could forget and a dream she refused to let die. For her fans, it was a revealing moment. Sydnie wasn't just another contestant trying to ride the wave of instant fame. She was grounded, humble, and unapologetically real. Her return to work didn't go unnoticed. A photo surfaced online showing Sydnie at her post, smiling warmly while wearing a modest gym uniform, no glitter, no spotlight, just Sydnie. She shared it herself on Instagram, captioning the image with a heartfelt message. "Back to the grind after the most surreal weekend of my life. Thank you for believing in me." That single post drew thousands of comments. Fans flooded her timeline with words of admiration, calling her the people's winner, and praising her for staying true to herself. "This is why we love you," one user wrote. "You didn't let the lights change who you are." What made the moment so powerful wasn't just the visual, it was the symbolism. In an industry often obsessed with glamour and overnight transformations, Sydnie reminded everyone that not all success stories are built on illusion. Even as the press hounded her for interviews and her performances racked up millions of views online, she remained tethered to reality. Her day job wasn't a footnote, it was part of the story, a symbol of perseverance, a reminder that behind the voice was a woman who had worked, struggled, and doubted herself just like anyone else. And perhaps that's what made her so magnetic. Not just the vocals, not just the stage presence, but the quiet message woven between every performance and every paycheck: you don't need to come from privilege to be unforgettable. You just need the courage to keep showing up, both on stage and off. And Sydnie did exactly that. She sang for her future, then laced up her sneakers and went back to work. Because Sydnie Christmas hadn't just stunned the nation, she'd earned its respect. As Sydnie Christmas rose to stardom in Britain's Got Talent's most talked about season, the applause came with a shadow. For every headline praising her vocal strength and stage charisma, there was another probing her past. And as the finale drew near, those whispers of controversy returned with full volume. Social media, always hungry for a plot twist, reignited the conversation. Was Sydnie's success truly earned, or had the show carefully curated her storyline for maximum emotional impact? Rumors swirled. Online forums dissected her resume line by line. Viral tweets accused the show of casting a seasoned performer under the guise of discovery. The term "fix" trended more than once, not just in relation to Sydnie but to the season as a whole. Many viewers believed they had been misled. To them, Sydnie wasn't a plucky unknown who had stumbled into greatness. She was a trained professional who had already walked the boards in Europe's largest theaters. Memes and YouTube reaction videos painted her as the ringer, a plant meant to guarantee a strong narrative for the season. But while the speculation grew louder, Sydnie herself remained silent. No rebuttal, no defensiveness, just grace and another show-stopping performance. Her silence in many ways became her most powerful answer. Each time she stepped on stage, she let her voice drown out the noise. Yet behind the scenes, the emotional toll was real. Close friends revealed that Sydnie felt the weight of every accusation. The insinuation that she didn't deserve her place cut deep, especially when she had spent years battling rejection, not riding privilege. Ironically, the very credits that critics waved as evidence of favoritism were actually markers of past struggle. Yes, she had experience, but she had never been a headliner, never been the it girl. Just another talented woman grinding in an industry that often looks past even the best. And then there was the public itself, split into two camps. On one side, those who believed in her, fans who argued that BGT was about performance, not backstory, and that talent should always rise to the top regardless of origin. On the other side, those who saw her journey as a distortion of the show's purpose. But in the end, something surprising happened. The longer Sydnie stayed quiet, the more people began to listen. Really listen. They saw her not as a controversy, but as a contradiction. A working-class woman with professional experience who still had to beg the world to take her seriously. Fame had found Sydnie Christmas, but belief had to be earned. One note, one ovation, one moment at a time. As Britain's Got Talent Season 17 reached its climax, all eyes were on Sydnie Christmas. Her name was no longer whispered in forums. It was emblazoned across headlines, trending hashtags, and coffee shop conversations nationwide. The girl who once stood at the edge of giving up was now the frontrunner, the fan favorite, and the story everyone had to watch unfold. But when the curtains parted on finale night, Sydnie didn't coast on hype. She conquered the moment. Her voice, once a plea for validation, had evolved into a declaration of power, Each note carried the weight of 100 rejections, and each phrase reminded the world that she hadn't come this far to falter now. The judge's response was immediate. Amanda Holden, who had championed Sydnie from the start, looked visibly moved as she declared the performance career-defining. Bruno Tonioli, ever theatrical, hailed her as a phenomenon born before our very eyes. Alicia Dixon simply called it electric, and Simon Cowell, the show's most notorious skeptic, didn't mince words. "Sydnie," he said, "this was the moment we've all been waiting for." The audience roared. Viewers at home echoed the sentiment. Twitter feeds lit up with real-time praise, and across YouTube and TikTok, her final performance spread like wildfire. But what came next was perhaps even more telling than the applause. Both Amanda and Simon made rare post-show press statements expressing their belief that Sydnie had what it takes to be more than a finalist. She could be a star. They weren't just complimenting her ability to sing. They were speaking to her resilience, her connection to audiences, her potential to transcend the label of a reality contestant. And fans agreed. Social media turned from debate to celebration. Win or lose, she's already made it, one post read. Others called her the heart of the season, the real discovery, and a once-in-a-decade voice. Sydnie's transformation was complete, not just in the eyes of the public, but in her own. No longer the struggling performer hiding behind gym uniforms and crushed auditions, she had emerged as a symbol of perseverance, a woman who had been told no so many times she nearly stopped asking, until one final chance turned into a legacy. She wasn't just competing anymore, she was rewriting the rules, and as the lights dimmed on the finale stage, one thing was clear: Sydnie Christmas wasn't going back to the shadows. She had earned her place in the spotlight, and this time she wasn't letting go. With the final notes still echoing from her show-stopping performances and her social media followers multiplying by the hour, Sydnie Christmas now stands at a career crossroads, not of uncertainty, but of opportunity. The once unknown name now draws headlines and boardroom interest. Rumors are swirling fast and wide. Record labels are circling, West End producers are making calls, and talent agencies are quietly negotiating to bring Sydnie into the big leagues. Insiders close to the show have hinted that multiple offers have already landed on her desk, some from theatrical revivals, others from pop recording studios hoping to harness her voice for crossover success. While nothing has been officially announced, there's no shortage of buzz about what her next act might look like. Speculation about a debut album is growing louder by the day. Fans have flooded her Instagram with requests for covers of classics, original material, and even Broadway cast recordings. One follower wrote, "I'll pre-order anything you release, just say the word." Meanwhile, others are calling for a solo UK tour, pointing to her built-in fan base and viral popularity as more than enough to sell out venues across the country. Sydnie, for her part, has remained relatively quiet, posting only subtle hints about what might be next. A photo in a recording studio here, a cryptic caption there. She's not rushing into fame, she's letting it unfold, this time on her own terms. Beyond the business side, her personal narrative is drawing attention too. Tabloids have run features on her early struggles, and human interest outlets have framed her story as a lesson in resilience. Interviews with family and friends paint the picture of a woman who never quite fit the mold, but always fought to shape her own. Some speculate she could even become a mentor for aspiring performers, especially those outside the usual elite circles. There's already talk of schools and stage programs inviting her to speak, to share her journey not as a fairy tale, but as a real story of grit, heartbreak, and hope. And while her next project remains under wraps, one thing is certain: Sydnie Christmas is no longer auditioning for approval. She has earned her moment, and now she gets to choose what comes next. Whether it's the West End, a solo tour, a chart-topping album, or something even more unexpected, Sydnie's fans are waiting, not just for what she'll sing, but for how she'll continue to surprise the world. Because if her journey so far has taught us anything, it's this: Sydnie doesn't follow the script, she rewrites it. Sydnie Christmas may have entered the public eye as a contestant, but she exited the competition as something far more enduring, a symbol. In an era where talent shows are often criticized for being formulaic or manipulated, her journey reminded audiences what raw authenticity looks like. She didn't win the season through theatrics or gimmicks. She won hearts with vulnerability, humor, and a voice that felt like it was echoing from somewhere deeper than just her lungs. And perhaps the most poetic irony, her very name, Christmas, became emblematic of what she brought to the stage: joy, surprise, renewal, and hope at a time when many had stopped expecting it. She was the gift nobody saw coming, unwrapped in real time on a stage built for spectacle but reclaimed by sincerity. Sydnie gave more than just memorable performances. She gave audiences someone to believe in again, someone imperfect, previously overlooked, and yet profoundly captivating. Her refusal to play the industry game, her return to a day job after viral fame, and her quiet resilience in the face of backlash made her feel more human than any packaged television narrative could fabricate. She didn't just sing My Way, she lived it. And while the competition may be over, Sydnie's story is still being written. In every fan who found courage through her struggle, in every aspiring artist who saw her rise as proof that it's never too late to take one last shot, Sydnie's impact continues to ripple outward. Her journey wasn't a fluke, and it wasn't engineered. It was fought for, every inch of it. And now, with the stage behind her and the spotlight following her into a new chapter, Sydnie has the one thing every true artist needs most: choice. She can record, tour, return to theater, or even disappear for a while to breathe after the whirlwind. No matter what path she takes next, one truth remains: the world is watching, not because she demanded it, but because she earned it. Sydnie Christmas didn't just step into fame, she became part of something larger. A reminder that talent doesn't fade just because the world hasn't seen it yet. Sometimes all it takes is a single moment, a single performance, a single person brave enough to say, "I'll try one more time." Sydnie did, and in doing so, she didn't just give the world her voice, she gave them a reason to listen.